welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
Today we're going to talk to you about some more Marvel Cinematic Universe movies.
What is this? Is this one, two, three, four, six? This is their sixth
Yeah.
episode about the MCU. Though I really enjoyed this retrospective. I kind of thought it was going to be a slog, to be honest. When we were first starting, I was like, oh boy. But it has been very interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to talk about this set of movies.
Yeah, no, it's interesting too because even the movies that aren't so great, I still found entertaining. Right, like the only one I truly hate is Iron Man 3. But even that one isn't so like bad that like if I was forced to watch it, I'd scream or something. Right, like
Yeah,
like,
it is interesting. Some of these I find hard to watch. So there are definitely some in my category, my like Iron Man 3 category. Maybe my bottom like 4 where they just like really piss me off in a way, but for the most part, like these movies are at the very least pretty watchable. And they all have moments that I'm like, that's cool. That's a cool moment.
yeah, no, that's definitely true. But today we're discussing what is it, Homecoming, Ragnarok, and Black Panther, right?
Correct.
And so we briefly talked about this last time about like why Phase 3 is all screwed up, or maybe we did this off stream, but I think the real answer is because of Spider-Man. Because Spider-Man isn't technically a true MCU movie, or it is an MCU movie.
So Spider-Man is a Sony movie, but Marvel shares the production, and he's in the MCU or whatever. So these are like considered MCU movies, but I think Phase 3 was supposed to have 6 movies. It was supposed to go Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, whatever, Infinity War. But then like it all kind of got jumbled. Also, especially as like the MCU got more successful, they did add in. I think there is one extra in the Phase 3. Oh, Captain Marvel. Is what I'm now remembering. Captain Marvel comes before Infinity War.
Also Infinity War splits, right? Like I don't think it was always going to be two. So that's part of it, but like that's definitely why Far From Home is on after the end of or end game. So but Homecoming and Far From Home are also not on Disney Plus, which made this slightly more difficult to do. But these are the things we do for you is rent movies on streaming services.
Okay, so Spider-Man: Homecoming. Give me your thoughts. What's the manga consensus on this one?
I'm gonna say it was fine and fun, but not particularly exceptional. Probably the way I'd put it. I don't know. I really just kind of was like, that was nice when it happened. I thought it did some kind of like it felt almost in the we talk about how like Aquaman kind of like doesn't do a lot that's adventurous. I felt kind of that way about the Spider-Man. Like the most adventurous thing it doesn't have the origin story.
It's pretty rote, I guess I would say. I am pretty negative on this movie, to be honest. I almost feel like a guy, like the people who really hate The Last Jedi, or even don't really hate The Last Jedi, but they're like, it's not Star Wars. It doesn't feel like Star Wars. You've made this argument a couple of times.
Yes.
I got really hit with that feeling, but for Spider-Man. This movie does not feel like a Spider-Man movie. And so even plot-wise, like whatever. I mean, see, even that, I do have some problems along sort of those lines. But like, and the action is pretty fine. There's some good stuff, some bad stuff in here, which is sort of a lot of these Marvel movies. Most of them have like a couple good scenes, a couple bad scenes, or whatever. Even the general sort of like hook and like the tension and all that stuff, the vulture stuff, like all that stuff works pretty well. But there's just this missing core of it, which I just don't. It just feels inauthentic to me. It is like this is a character that is not Spider-Man. Or maybe a good example of this would be people who don't like BVS because Batman kills people, right? Where it's like, it is something that assaults kind of the core of what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man, such that it becomes tougher to watch, I guess, is sort of where I come down on this. And I think really it's wrapped up in this Tony Stark shit, where like, I don't know, man, it just feels very weird to be in a movie where Spider-Man's goal revolves around this hero worship of Tony Stark and the Avengers. It's so weird, and I really hate it, and it just does not feel like Peter Parker. It doesn't feel like Spider-Man. It especially doesn't feel like teenage Spider-Man, right? Like, there have been instances where Spider-Man has been in the Avengers, but one, they're kind of happenstance, where like he joins up with the Avengers and he kind of like makes friends and they call him, right? So this is like Brian Michael Bendis' new Avengers run from the sort of late 2000s, is sort of along these sorts of lines. Um, and Spider-Man is an adult. He's married, right? You know, he has like a full-time job or whatever. It just feels there's so much cognitive dissonance towards that and him being a kid and really wanting to join the Avengers and all this stuff. I don't know. It just really bothers me.
Doesn't Spider-Man though, like in kind of his original incarnation, start out a lot younger? Like, doesn't he age with the series?
Yeah. So he does. And he wants to be a part of the Fantastic Four, which is a thing. But I also think the Fantastic Four is a little bit different than kind of the Avengers in this context. First of all, it was the 60s, and nobody was doing any of this Civil War kind of like serious superhero business crap. They're fighting like, you know, the Rainbow Man or whatever, right? Like very basic kind of superhero stuff. Um, and then the other incarnation, which I'm intimately aware of, right? Like Ultimate Spider-Man, which I own a bunch of the comics spine over there somewhere. It was the first thing that got me into comics in the first place, right? Reading issues of Ultimate Spider-Man. In Ultimate Spider-Man, he has a relationship with Nick Fury, which I actually called out in our Far From Home review, which was kind of like a cool throwback. But his relationship with Nick Fury is very like strained in a way because of sort of like the geopolitics of it all, right? Like he just wants to be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and it's Nick Fury who is pushing him and saying, "Listen, kid, you're a superhero, and you're gonna have to grow up someday," sort of thing. And so like that stuff feels very natural to me. But when they're sort of flipping it in the movie, Tony is like, "No, stay a kid," and Spider-Man is like, "I want to be an Avenger." It just feels so off to the to kind of like the Spider-Man that I know and enjoy, such that it is weirdly inauthentic. Also, I really don't love his relationship with Tony in the movie because it kind of feels like it's built on trying to create another Uncle Ben after he has learned the Uncle Ben lesson, right? Like the Uncle Ben lesson is with great power comes great responsibility, right? And it seems like Tony is trying to teach Spider-Man that exact same lesson over again, which just feels very, like by the time he is Spider-Man, he has learned that lesson and he is already doing, and he's already like doing the thing. And so now where he's kind of going out and it feels like he's kind of auditioning and there's this ambition to it. It's not a superhero thing, right? He's like trying to impress someone else and he's trying for like the job interview, which I just sort of, I don't know, I just hate that stuff. So I really don't like Spider-Man Homecoming.
No, I think I'm with you for part of that. I also think that like the message of the movie's kind of muddled in a lot of ways. I honestly, if I'm being cynical about it, I wonder if they knew they were going to kill Tony at the end of Endgame and like this was just a way to like give it more emotional like punch.
Yeah.
Was the other part. And so something that I think like this is a little bit more surface, but in terms of like not like Spider-Man, this Spider-Man doesn't seem as quippy, if that makes sense, as they're playing him up as an awkward nerd, which I think also kind of fits into his milieu, but like he doesn't become like super like he tries, but it doesn't come across as kind of as quippy when he's Spider-Man. I don't know. At least that's the way
Part of what makes and it's a very specific kind of quippy. It feels like they are kind of leaning too into the typical Marvel quips when I think Spider-Man has a very specific brand, if
Yeah.
if you want to say of quip, which is that he is in these kind of life-threatening situations, so he kind of has a motor mouth thing about it. But like, I just feel like it never got to that point. You know what's funny? The Amazing Spider-Man movies, which are terrible, do this really well, where he's just kind of like constantly like making jokes and like kind of throwing stuff out, but you can kind of tell that it's like nervous, right? Like it's like a nervous tick almost that he's like constantly talking and making jokes and
Filling silence and whatnot.
yeah, exactly, right. So I also feel like that was a little bit weird and off. I also did not love the way that he was portrayed with the school kids. If I this is something that, and I haven't seen Far From Home since it came out, so this might be wrong, but this is something that I think it nails in the second movie, but is kind of like out of focus. Like it's there, but it's not ever really the focus, and so it never quite clicks or works for me. Which is like the tension between Peter wants to be a normal kid who's doing normal kid things, but his Spider-Man responsibilities keep pulling him away, right? And this is part of where the movie breaks down for me, right? Like the Spider-Man responsibilities are about doing the right thing even when it's hard, right? So you have these situations where they're almost like Shakespearean, right? Where Peter wants to go to the dance, but he has to respond to some sort of like urgent, like life altering sort of threat. But because Peter's motivation in this is about impressing Tony Stark and joining the Avengers, it just always feels self-centered and sort of self-serving. And so it's never that tension between I'm trying to do the right thing, but all of my friends, but I keep letting all my friends down because I'm such a huge fucking flake, right? Where I keep like leaving, and it's there in the movie where it kind of like alludes to Peter going on like the trip and bailing on the decathlon, but they win the decathlon anyway. He doesn't really pay that consequence. He still gets to go to homecoming with Liz, so he doesn't really like there are no consequences to him sort of blowing off his friends all the time. But like it is actually sort of there if I were to describe the events of it, right? Like he disappears from the Washington Monument, or sorry, he disappears from the trip, but then Spider-Man shows up at the Washington Monument to save them. But that's like pretty close to Peter leaves from the Washington Monument to like abandon his friends or whatever, and so that he can show up and save their lives as Spider-Man. But it's all kind of like weirdly plotted and convoluted and backwards. So it just like never connects in the way that I want it to. But I remember from Far From Home, right? Like that's when it really connects because you really do feel that Peter is like trying to get away, but he is also kind of compelled to, help stop Mysterio or whatever. So it is that real tension between doing the right thing, being a good person, being a hero, right, and living the normal life that he wants to live real bad.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is like kind of the arc of this movie, right? Is he moves into that mode of like
Yeah, yeah.
of
I guess I feel like by the time he's Spider-Man, he should already be in that mode. Is sort of like my like
yeah.
complaint.
I mean,
And in a weird way, they're like I don't know. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Okay.
it might have been better if like they made this like an origin story movie because it feels like the audience wants you to take it away is that like he is becoming Spider-Man, right? Like
Yeah.
like he learns to fight without he wasn't when he was just a suit, right? Like and that's like I think that's like what the arc of the movie wants to tell you. Maybe they could have done it better with some like better visual language, right? Like have like the original Tony Stark suit not be like red, just like look slightly off, right? So that like when he gets it back and he's like, and here's an update, and he colors it right or something, right? Like something like that. I think could have
I
like
also think there's a couple of other pieces. I have a lot of nitpicky problems with this movie that I don't think are huge, but that just like piss me off. For instance, I kind of am on the Vulture side, to be completely honest with you. The Vulture is maybe, and this is kind of, I've talked before about how Thanos being a sympathetic villain is actually really bad, and I don't like it. It's kind of like the apotheosis of this trend towards like mega sympathy in our villains, right? We've sort of gotten away from the Joker in The Dark Knight, who just wants to see the world burn,
right.
and we're now in this world where like everybody has to be sort of like all very noble, but they just like went too far or whatever. Like I really find it weird, and maybe this is just like a 2020 politics thing. Like the Vulture just seems like a very hardworking guy who has like a lot of responsibilities on his shoulders that is getting like kind of legitimately fucked over by Tony, and then the whole plot of the movie is like setting up this sort of doomsday scenario where he gets like where he like steals Tony's shit, but like Tony is like this like super mega billionaire. I don't know, like
Well, I mean, well,
that feels weird to me.
first of
Like,
all, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that he gets screwed over by the government, who shuts down his salvage operation.
I mean, okay, fine, sure.
Yeah,
The crony capitalism of Tony Stark controlling damage control, which is a
yeah,
department of the government or
yeah,
whatever else.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I mean?
But
And
this is
like.
but like so his real sin isn't that he wanted to do good things. It's that he sold weapons to like criminals, right? Like
Yeah, and the thing is that they show really only kind of like one instance of that going like kind of weirdly, like horrifically wrong.
Hmm.
There's that point where they blast the bodega in the very beginning, but it's like I really felt like the criminals were like a real threat in a way.
Right.
Because even because I think the other thing is supposed to be this the Staten Island ferry, but that is played off as Peter's fault, right? Like the narrative says it is Peter's fault that this all went wrong or whatever. So it's just like it has a very like I have a weird interaction with how like the villain comes across. Also, they're all just like very likable guys. You know, Michael Keaton is kind of this like dad figure. The Tinkerer, Phineas Mason, who's like the guy that builds the shit, like he's just like funny and great. And it's not like I don't know. I just like I don't know. I just have a
Yeah.
weird relationship with
No,
these
and they keep him around too, right? They don't kill him off, right? Like he's
villains.
and they keep him sympathetic at the end, right? Like he doesn't sell out Peter, right? Like, and and I honestly, I remember the first time around not seeing the twist coming,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was well done and well played. I thought that was like probably the most interesting part of the movie, right? Is like Peter's
Yeah.
personal life crashing in that way. But yeah, no, I like, I don't know. I definitely get your point though, right? Like, and also this is um in that way kind of like the most, because it's not a Marvel movie, right? They don't kill off their villain, maybe, right? Like like the only other villain that sticks around is like Loki, right?
Yeah,
uh
I mean, I really love the Vulture, to be honest. I think
yeah,
the Vulture suit is really cool. I like the upgrade to the high altitude suit. I think all the gadgets that he's using are just like insane. Oh, this is another thing. This is another nitpicky thing that bugs me. I fucking hate this techno suit. Spider-Man should have web shooters. That is it. He has web shooters and he has his baseline powers, sticking to walls, mildly super strong, not really super strong. The spider sense, right? I this techno shit drives me up a wall, right? Like the taser webs, the ricochet, the he's talking to the fucking AI, all of this stuff drives me nuts. I hate it. That is another piece of like this feels inauthentically Spider-Man
mm,
to me. You know, like Spider-Man, if you want to do the cool gadget hero, like this is Batman territory, right? Batman is a cool gadget hero. Spider-Man is a cool gadget hero. Spider-Man is not. Spider-Man is a, or Spider-Man kind of lives in this like do it yourself world, right? Like one of
right,
the nice things about Peter is that he's like legitimately a really smart, really clever guy, and he has like a lot of these and he has a lot of these skills that then can kind of get in a MacGyver sort of way, right? Like get turned around. So it's always fun watching it's or I guess reading. I guess I'm referencing comics here. Like you're reading Spider-Man where he comes up with kind of like an ingenious at-home solution to a problem, right? So for instance, maybe he builds a tracker out of like stuff he goes and buys at Home Depot, and this like furthers into the, oh, am I going to spend my measly paycheck on MJ, taking MJ on a date, or am I going to spend my measly paycheck on getting the shit together so that I can track this bad guy? And then he puts the little tracker on the bad guy, but it's like a shitty tracker and it like breaks, or you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
that's very core Spider-Man. And so all of this like tech bullshit, oh, it always really makes me mad because
That,
it's just like,
no, it's interesting because I don't know. This is a little tangential, but like there's one of the things I think we've talked about is like the best villains, or like a lot of villains, are just kind of like an aspect of the character reflected through the mirror darkly, right? Um, and I think about Shocker, who I'm not a super big fan of this version of Shocker, just because he's like not a version of Shocker really. He's like a guy with an electrical fist. Part of that character story, I believe, that his name's Herman something, right? He builds the gloves, right? Which is
yeah,
kind of like the same type of thing, right? Like Spider-Man through the mirror darkly. But it's funny because he also doesn't build the gloves in this one. So like Spider-Man, like the text.
I actually really like the Shocker is a great hero, or I'm sorry, a great villain, and I really like him because he's kind of a punching bag for Spider-Man. But one of the things that makes the Shocker great in the comics is that he's kind of everyone's like go-to, right? If you need to have action, so like every comic book should have action, right? Every issue or whatever should have action. If you need to have some action take place, you just kind of have a couple of pages where the Shocker is out of jail and he's stealing something. You know what I mean? And Spider-Man shows up, thwacks him in the face, and puts him in like the police van or whatever. And he's almost kind of a comic relief in that way, right? But the thing that I love about the Shocker in that instance is it kind of represents this sort of like the futile nature of what Spider-Man is doing. In the comics, this is a legal thing where they say that because Spider-Man is the one that thwacked him, you know, like he goes to jail for a couple of months, but he always like his trials are like mistrials or whatever else, you know, like he always gets out on some legal technicality. Like sometimes it's assisted by, you know, like Kingpin or like organized crime figures or whatever else sort of thing. But he gets out of jail all the time. He has a very easy time like breaking out of jail. And so it is sort of neat that he is in this for like 10 fucking seconds to have what, well, I guess so. There's two. There's the one who dies immediately.
Yeah.
They have that van chase, which I think kind of sucks. But then it goes to the second guy, and I actually like that fight scene with the buses. Like this is one of the action scenes that works really well in the movie, where he's like punching the buses and the bus hits Spider-Man or whatever. That stuff works great.
You know, I think I agree with that. I was just speaking more to kind of like that.
I got away from the point there, but yeah, I definitely agree with you. In fact, in a weird way, it kind of feels like Vulture is more of a like a dark reflection of Tony Stark in a way, right? Like, he is like the working man version of Tony, and he's kind of created this sort of like villain Avengers out of this tech shit, which also I think is part of what feels like misplaced. Like, I don't know. Somebody pointed out to me. I think I saw a tweet once where it was like, "Isn't it weird that the climactic point of Spider-Man: Homecoming is that Spider-Man stops the Vulture from stealing Iron Man's shit?" And yeah, I don't know, that just like in those basic details, I don't know. It it just doesn't work for me. So at the end of the day, Spider-Man: Homecoming I rate pretty low. Though the Vulture being good and some other stuff that I like in there kind of kicks it above some of the other movies that I would say are worse.
Yeah, no, I mean for me, it's kind of competent. This is like another movie we'll discuss later. A movie that is good enough, but because Marvel has a lot of movies that I like, it ends up in the bottom half. So you know.
Fair enough. Okay, so then we get to Thor Ragnarok, which I have to say I'm incredibly conflicted about. Because so I have in my notes like this is where Marvel action feels like it's really on the money, right? A lot of the time I describe the action as good in spots, but like bad in other spots. Like the only version that's kind of like good end to end is Winter Soldier. It feels like before this, like even Ultron, which is still at the top of my list, right? Ultron has good fight scenes like the one with Hulk and Iron Man and the Hulkbuster armor. Like that stuff works great with the unpowered heroes in Busan, Seoul, in Korea somewhere. With the unpowered heroes in Korea, I think that whole fight scene works really great. But then it has other ones like I don't like the beginning one. I think mostly because the camera work is not great, and I also don't love that the way the Sokovia one at the end. We talked about all this stuff a couple of episodes ago. I feel like a lot of Marvel movies work like that on an action level, where I just kind of like some of them are good, some of them are shitty. No, none of them really kind of like hit it out of the park. Thor Ragnarok actually does kind of really hit it out of the park. Every single action scene in Thor Ragnarok is good and satisfying, mostly because the cinematography is much better, and also partially because I think it leans into kind of the CGI stuff more. It feels like the more sort of like out there CGI stuff tends to get filmed a little bit slower and a little bit better compared to the the more frantic in person stuff in a way. And so there's just like a lot of angles to the fights that are pulled back and locked off, like very very clear, which is sort of what I like about which is like what I want to see in these fight scenes, right? Like the death of any of these fight scenes is when somebody goes to throw a punch and then they cut to another angle of the punch being hit, and that happens all the time in Marvel movies, right?
Yeah.
Except for here, it feels like anytime somebody gets hit, you watch the punch get thrown, you watch him connect, and you watch the other dude go, whatever, flying, right? Which is all very satisfying. Also, all of the action scenes were pretty well set up. They didn't have that kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy sort of has this where in the prison break scene it's kind of setting up this what are those things called, Rube Goldberg machine, right? Most of these action scenes is just like there's Hulk, there's Thor, they beat the they beat the fuck out of each other,
Yeah.
right? There aren't a lot of like complex or really plotty fight scenes in those sorts of ways. But I also think that that just kind of works. It was very satisfying to watch Thor just like buzz people on this bridge, which I think I criticized the first time we reviewed this movie. I thought that that was boring, but this time it just really worked for me. So yeah, but I'm also the reason I said I'm conflicted on this movie is this is the worst Marvel humor. I think that this is Marvel humor at its worst, where it is constantly undercutting the drama and the stakes, and I just have a really hard time getting invested on that level.
Yeah, I think I agree. Definitely agree with you on that. Like that the Marvel humor like is a real problem in this. I also think that part of that is trying to kind of like give Thor like a person, like not Thor the character, but like Thor the movies a personality. Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because I just kind of don't have one up until this point. It was kind of generic feeling. I think it's a great addition for this movie feels like it gets like it gets a lot from Taika Waititi and as a director, not as the Rockman, although I do love Korg. Um, but like I think part of that is him is like I feel like that jokiness feels kind of like him, at least from the other stuff I've seen from him, which is like and it's not like it's usually not that bad is the way bad's over the top, but maybe trying to kind of like set it apart from other Marvel movies which have a bunch of it. He pushed it harder, or maybe that's just kind of a natural result of the process. But I really like the movie. It is towards the top for me, um, mostly because like I think I agree with you generally. I also think that like um, Asgard looks really good. I think the visuals kind of just work really well in a way that we don't
I
like.
think the Guardians movies sort of started this trend, but it
Yeah,
kind of is really. And I think maybe I would say Guardians 2 is better. Maybe it's really neck and neck for me with these two, but like these are the movies they really get out of that those grades I was complaining about with Civil War, right? We're just like, I mean, to be honest with you, so to be fair, Thor Ragnarok actually does have a lot of these grades, and it does piss me off. The I'm borrowing all of this from Patrick Williams, by the way. The way they shoot Asgard, especially kind of in the beginning, is exactly this. It's super bright lighting, very like gray all over, right? Which I hate. And I think looks very bad. And Thor 2 actually does this right. If you notice in Thor 2, they're always shooting with this like backlight on the back of their heads, which creates this rim of light for like a halo effect, right? Which actually looks really great because Asgard is this kind of like other realm, sort of heavenly or whatever else, which like makes it look cool and unique and like visually unique. In here, Asgard is the most visually dull place, and it's actually Sakaar that's kind of like bursting with color and sort of life, which I think partially. I don't feel like people really remember the end of this movie so much as they remember the beginning, and it sort of falls into that like fun and games thing that we talked about before, where like the Marvel movies are at their best when they're doing the fun and game stuff in the middle, and then when they kind of have to buckle down and go serious at the end, they sort of suck. I think this falls into that a little bit. Also, I don't love Hela, and I think she's not great. Which kind of contributes to this problem, which is a different thing. That's like built out of she's sort of off doing her own thing while like Thor and friends are having fun. So every time it cuts to her, it just feels like, what the fuck are we doing? Like what the fuck are we doing over here? And so she doesn't have the kind of deep interaction with the hero that I would have liked to see. The Vulture does this, right? Where he's
yeah.
constantly running into Peter and they're talking and they're going back and forth and they're changing and evolving because of those interactions, right? Thor meets Hela in the beginning, right, in basically the end of the first act, and then fights Hela at the end of the third act. And it's just like there's all of the stuff in the middle has basically nothing to do with her, which I think is weird and not great. But
Yeah, I
whatever.
mean, so I agree with you that that's what happens. I don't know how like mad I am about it, right? Like it's a way to tell a story. I think it makes her not a great villain, but I don't
Sure.
think it means that it's a bad story, if that makes sense. Um,
I do like her interactions with Thor quite a lot.
mm,
I don't know. It's funny because I don't think that you need a ton of interaction to, like Man of Steel is like this, right? Zod shows up in the dead middle of the movie. He's there in the beginning when Kal-El is a fucking baby, obviously, and then he shows up in the middle after all this other stuff has happened. But I think he's a great villain because of like the interactions that he has, even though he only has half a movie to be a villain in. Um, So it's not like you need a ton of time, but it's just I don't know. There's something weird about that the way that the Sakaar stuff just feels so removed from Hela and what she's up to and what she's doing. Um, that creates like the disconnect, I guess, for me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I definitely agree with you there, but I think that's kind of like the Zakar stuff is fun, but I don't quite understand what the point is. Is it just to like, is it like supposed to be an arc for Hulk? Like is this like a secret Hulk movie? Is that the point? Because like I guess like they try and play it like it's like Thor remembering that he's the god of thunder, but like that doesn't feel like it's a well enough established point for it to like when it's like when he like remembers how to do lightning stuff or like figures out how to do lightning stuff without the hammer. It's like wait, that was like a problem in the like it didn't seem like it was properly
Yeah,
like
it is like a
telegraphed.
crisis of confidence, I guess. But it's sort of like not a great character arc, especially because the movie is the movie has this sort of Bugs Bunny problem, right? Where Thor is so funny that it's hard for me like this is the core Marvel movie, like the Marvel humor problem where like it's so funny and sort of like always poking fun that like when things do get sort of tough and serious, it's hard for me to take it seriously, right? Like Thor having this moment in the Colosseum where he's getting his butt whooped and then he sort of summons the thunder to really, punch Hulk as hard as he can in his stupid fucking face or whatever. Like I don't know, that just like doesn't it just like doesn't work for me on a character level. There's cool stuff that happens. I like the interactions with Loki. I like the thing where he kind of reads Loki's future betrayal. I like the stuff with Hulk. I like how he has to sort of get Hulk on his side and like the interactions that they have between him and Hulk and him and Banner, where he's just trying to like keep this guy stable in a really stressful environment. Like all of that stuff sort of on a second to second level works, but I don't think on a longer plot thread really tracks. Oh, also all the Odin stuff, right? The Odin stuff is in the end of the movie treated like it is this moment of great thematic and character import, right? Where, when he's in the Colosseum, when he has this crisis of confidence, he sees Odin before he summons the thunder or whatever. And the same thing happens when he's fighting Helia and summons the thunder. But that stuff was all played for laughs with this Doctor Strange, like back and forth, and he goes to Loki, and Loki's like, "I swear, I dropped him off in this old folks' home or whatever." And it's just like, I don't. You can't set this thing up as a joke in the first half and then tell me that it's actually a serious part of his character in the second half, if that makes sense.
I don't know if I agree with you on that one. I think like yeah, the nursing home thing is played for laugh, but it's not a huge laugh, right? Like it's kind of like set at Loki's expense, and like his relationship with like they're both the brothers' relationship with their father is like a consistent theme across the three movies, and I do think that the moment on the cliffside on the fjord on
Like on the fjord, yeah,
yeah, I think that works really well. Like they like make sure to cut it off, like anytime anything like
that's true.
that approaches that happens, it's like when Hela shows up, which is like well divorced from like when their interaction with Odin. So
I guess it's sort of the whiplash then, because you're right. Actually, in that moment, dead straight, played dead straight. But because it's surrounded by all of this haha funny business, right? It kind of takes on this osmosis of a haha funny business, right? Like the scenes getting up to that moment are so Looney Tunes that when we're in that moment and it's trying to tell me that we're watching, Citizen Kane, it's hard for me to disassociate because they're next to each other in that way. Do you know what I
okay,
mean?
I see what you're saying, right? Because like directly before this is when Loki like says I've been falling for half an hour, right? Like which is
Yeah, and
definitely
like all of that stuff with Doctor Strange, it's just all bits, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
all comedy. Um, even I don't know. So that's yeah. I do. It's weird. I'm actually coming out more negative on this movie than I intended because I, I feel like this is kind of the top of my middle, right? In a way, if I have a top caliber of movies, a middle caliber of movies, a bottom caliber of movies, Thor Ragnarok is probably the top of the middle, and it really loses out because of this stuff. But I want to say that there's a lot that I like in this movie, but really we've just kind of been complaining, and I really agree with a lot of these complaints, which almost makes me want to like rate it lower than I have it in a
Yeah,
way. Especially because this stuff is core character story stuff, right?
so I mean I think I don't know. I don't know if like, so I'm gonna say, like I said, I have no problem separating out the seriousness of the Odin stuff from the other stuff. I also don't like, it is fun for, like, I think it's meant to be more of a romp with like like, it's like I don't know, like it almost feels like an 80s comedy, right? Where it's like, it's jokey jokes and then like it gets very serious for a moment.
Or like the Ocean's movies, actually. We were talking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
No, that's a great way to put it. Yeah,
Yeah, there's
absolutely.
no real character arcs or anything there. It's
Yeah.
just a kind of about the fun romp. I do think that that's kind of what it wants to be in a way, but there is just like this like hanging character stuff that kind of gets on my nerves and bothers me a little bit. I do like
Like
uh
go on, sorry.
I do like the interaction of that like little team though, right? Where he says, yeah, "I'm getting together a team," and he puts together like the Hulk and Loki and Valkyrie, right? And they're sort of, like all of that stuff. I think actually does work pretty well in the same way that kind of like the prison break in Guardians works really well,
Yeah.
just sort of on like a scene to scene sequence level.
Yeah, I think part of it is supposed to be like, the arc of like what Asgard is. Um
Hmm.
yeah. I think big problem with that too though is that like I think it ends pretty great, but then we find out like immediately that it's like all like, like the rug gets cut out from
Yeah.
under that immediately in the next
Whoa,
movie.
does Infinity War change the landscape of this movie?
Yeah.
And I think this will probably reflect worse on Infinity War when we see that than it does on Thor Ragnarok. I think at the end of the day, I am on Thor Ragnarok's side too much to like. But yeah, it is funny that post credit scene. Because we know where Infinity War happens and how kind of like thoroughly. I also like Thor losing his eye. I forgot how much I like that detail and how well it plays in the moment. Like even if kind of this wider Thor character arc stuff is not great, Thor and his dad having that sort of relationship is something that feels like truly and fundamentally authentically Thor, right? Like for instance, that Thor run that I keep referencing every time we talk about Thor, um, that has a whole thing where Thor takes on kind of Odin's powers and responsibilities, and he's bringing gods back to life because it's after Ragnarok, right, where Thor still lives, but he needs to sort of like awaken the other like gods for like a brand new cycle after they have gone to the other side of Ragnarok or whatever. And he's faced with the choice of awakening his dad and Odin is caught in this eternal cycle of killing Surtur. Every day he and Surtur kill one another, and then overnight they regenerate and they do so again. And so Thor is like, I could bring you back to life. You could come to Midgard, hang out with me and like the other Asgardians. And Odin is like, no, that's your responsibility now. You have the Odin power. I have to, be locked in this eternal, conflict or whatever with Surtur. And so like all of that stuff with him and his dad and him kind of becoming his dad felt very good, and I like that. And I forgot how much it works in the moment of his fight and his kind of confrontation with Helia in the Asgardian throne room.
Yeah. I'm also, I don't know, something I thought was a nice touch. The other side, this is like Loki characterization, right? Is that like when Loki sets up the play that glorifies him, doesn't like the only part he kind of omits is like the part where he snuck away, right? Like he's very honest about like, the fact that he's like kind of, a dick, and like he puts in the part where it's like, I didn't do it for you, right? Which, feels, I don't know, I think that's like a great kind of moment. I really like Loki doesn't get a lot of time to shine in this movie, but I do like him here. So
Yeah. I
whatever that's
also
worth.
I also like him here. I also like Jeff Goldblum a lot. This is the fun romp shit. All of that fun romp shit is fun and rompy, and like uh, just like I feel like Jeff Goldblum showed up and Taika Waititi was just like, you do you. I don't care whatever else is going on. You do you, and he
Well,
did.
that's kind of the point, right? Like you got Jeff Goldblum to be like the most Jeff Goldblum as he could be, right? Like especially that initial post credit scene, which is like, yeah, well, I played my part. You have to have someone to rebel against, and we'll call it a tie. It's like, it's,
Oh God, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I also thought it was funny how two moments back to back in Spider-Man Homecoming, there was the moment where the vulture melts the first shocker, and with like the gun, he's like, "Oh, I thought that was the anti-gravity gun." That moment did not work for me. I was like, "You just killed a dude, and you're playing it off with a fucking joke." Like, and it just was very weird to me. And that exact same thing happens in this one, but I like laughed my ass off when he like melts the other guy with the melting stick, and then the melting stick comes back. He's like, "No, why are you giving me the melting stick?" It's just like I don't know. I thought that bit was funny, and it was funny because it was also in the movie, immediately previous to this.
Yeah.
So anyway, like I said,
Yeah.
Thor Ragnarok kind of lives in like the top of my middle, mostly dragged down by this comedy stuff, but also, if I'm really being honest with myself, some of these like overarching story problems. We also didn't really talk about the thematic stuff, but I actually like that stuff quite a bit, right? Like Helya talking about, right, like the conquest that made Asgard Asgard, and her kind of like embodying Asgard, sort of
Right.
like since I think that stuff is cool and works really well, and is like really neat. So yeah. But really what I love about this movie, I think, is all the action is good. Like that Thor Hulk fight scene is great. That's like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
probably the best fight scene in the movie, and it's really fucking sweet. But also, Helya like mowing down all these dudes by like throwing the daggers. It's just sweet. It's just cool.
I'll absolutely agree with you. Although the final fight scene does have like the worst Marvel humor moment, which is like Bruce slamming into
Oh
the
my
bridge.
Oh, I hate it so much. Oh, I winced because I had forgotten that moment, and it happened, and oh, because it's one of those things where that happens all the time in the comics, where you push Banner into these, and it happens in the movies, right? It happens in Ultron, where she pushes him into the big hole, and then the Hulk jumps out. It happens in the Incredible Hulk, where he falls out of the helicopter. You can play that moment, but the moment doesn't work if you show his like twitching corpse on the bridge. That bothered me a lot.
Yeah, I think that might be the worst one in the MCU, like the worst single moment of it.
I would agree with that. Well, I would agree with that for now. That it's so bad. It is woof. It is bad.
All right, well, now it's on to Black Panther then, right?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, Black Panther. I fucking love this movie. I remember loving this movie when it came out, and I said it was my favorite Marvel movie. And boy, oh boy, is it good! Is it great? The big things that I forgot how good about that were good about Black Panther. One, the music is amazing, and it was one of the only Marvel movies I feel like I can really say that about. Even Thor Ragnarok, which I think has okay music, but it bothers me. I really hate the immigrant song in that, which I know everybody's going to be like, buddy, that's crazy. The immigrant song is so cool, and that's what makes the movie fun. I fucking hate the immigrant song, and I will die on that hill. But all of the music in Black Panther is so good. And I remember, so Brian Coogler brought Ludwig Göransson, who's actually the composer on Community. Like he used to TV shows. He did Community and he did New Girl. Um, with him to do Black Panther, and he really kind of went like above and beyond to making stuff just sound so good. Like how Killmonger's theme is kind of like this hip hop 808s thing with like a drum machine, right? Like the 808 is a famous drum machine, but also sort of mixed with the flute that like is part of his African roots, while T'Challa's theme is all African instrumentation because he is, like he is from Wakanda and he doesn't have that interaction with American culture that Killmonger does. I also just I don't know, I just think that it has a different sort of sound palette that doesn't fall into like some of these movies just kind of die out in my ears because I'm so used to hearing this stuff, right? When it's scored very straightforward and uninterestingly, I guess, like Thor 1 and Thor 2 or whatever, are probably good examples of this. That stuff I just don't hear it at a certain point, because I'm just so used to hearing these sorts of sounds. But because so much of the music was built with just an entirely different musical palette, I was constantly on. I was like, oh, this is something like new, and then I'm hearing it a new way. And I was just like always thinking about it. I don't know why the music was the first thing I went to. What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm basically kind of like it's fine, right? Like I feel almost exactly about this as the way I do about Homecoming, in a lot of ways. I think I agree with you on the sound stuff, although I tend to not pay attention to that stuff as much. It just doesn't occur to me. Um, I think T'Challa is like the kind of arc he goes through is like, I mean it's kind of like the opening up stuff, but like as a character, it really doesn't, I think, like run through right. Like there's like kind of the traditional framing of this is like the hero loses in the second act because of like something he has done wrong, and that's not true here, right? Like he is kind of like
Really?
straight out, well, he just straight out loses to Killmonger, and not because of any flaw with T'Challa, right? Like Killmonger just like straight up beats him in a fair fight, and that's
Oh,
fine.
see, I would actually disagree with that. So from my perspective, this is one of the things I actually really like about Black Panther. Most Marvel movies are have this arc of selfishness to selflessness, right? This is the Tony Stark arc
Right,
of I'm doing something selfish, but I learn to kind of be. Doctor Strange does this is maybe like the archetypal one in sort of like the modern late era MCU movies where he starts off as this kind of selfish prick, but as he approaches these like hurdles, he realizes that he needs to kind of give up himself to be. That's what heroism is, right? And I've talked before how that can be a little bit boring for me, and I want to see it in other places. Like, so for instance, in Man of Steel, the arc is never Superman is always a hero in that movie, right? But the question is, does he trust humanity, right? And what his interaction with humanity kind of like looks like, because one of his dads says that he's going to be an inspiration to these people, and the other one of his dads says that he needs to kind of like hide himself or whatever. So his arc is about the relationship he has with the people of Earth. T'Challa's arc is similar in that it is not as he is fundamentally selfless, right? He is a
sure,
hero and he wants to do heroic things, but his arc is about kind of progressivism versus tradition, right? And the moment where he loses to Killmonger is a thematic and character moment of where he realizes that his father was wrong, right? And that this grave mistake kind of got made, and he now bears the brunt of it. He now like sort of bears the responsibility for like his father's mistakes, and as the leader of Wakanda. So it is about like that kind of responsibility stuff, which I love. I eat this shit up. This is the core theming behind Aquaman that makes me love Aquaman comics, and it's right here, and I love it, and I
so
love every minute of it. But I do see what you mean, because it's not an agency thing. He himself didn't really do anything wrong, right? All he did is sort of trust his dad and think of his dad as being like a good king, when really he made this really monumental kind of terrible mistake, right?
sure,
So
yeah,
it's less personal. It's not like his fault in a way.
yeah, which is kind of like, I would prefer it to have been less personal than him losing one-on-one combat, right? Because like
Oh,
the,
sure.
the the framing there, I think, to me, wants to be that, like, you know like it would be his fault then, right? Like I think you can do it on like a larger, a different kind of scale, right? Like
Aquaman does that, right? Aquaman loses to Orm in one-on-one
yeah,
combat because he upped his overconfidence, right? And
right,
because he doesn't care and he's not invested in in sort of the liberation of Atlantis and in stopping Orm's plan. And so he goes in and he gets his ass kicked and he has to be saved by Mira. I think that moment works much better in that movie than in this one. Even though they are similar, right, in sort of like construction, they are totally different because of the underlying kind of like character pieces that are moving.
yeah. Um, I mean, the other part of this movie that bothers me is some of the Marvel humor, right? Like the what are, like, and it's not even Marvel
Oh,
humor, right? Like the what are those things still makes me cringe every time. I hate it. I hate it so much. Um,
I did also cringe, but I kind of like sympathetically cringed with you. I sort of saw it through your eyes in a way
yeah,
where I was like, "Oh right, this is that moment that Mango fucking hates."
yeah. I'm like not a fan. I'm not a fan of kind of like, I'm not a fan of things that like place place. It's not even place things in like, it's
It's
like,
like if Spider-Man had made a somebody. I think you said this last time we recorded on Black Panther. It's like if Spider-Man made a "It's Wednesday, my dudes" joke,
yeah,
because part of that joke is he's wearing a Spider-Man costume, right? And that joke is from somebody laid this out on Twitter once. That joke is from 2013. So technically, in the MCU lore, Spider-Man saw that vine 3 years later, made a suit, and named himself Spider-Man after it. Right? and like or whatever. So it's like if you reference that joke, it's weird. I get that. I definitely do.
Yeah.
Because it puts us too kind of close to one another, especially because like this is a world where dudes have prosthetic arms that are shooting concussive blasts that destroy cars, right? This is a world where magic and gods and all this stuff exists. It's just very weird to be like, oh, and also if you go on Twitter, there's dank ass memes like.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. And it also implies that like that she's on Twitter looking at dank ass memes, right? Like which I get.
It's also a very outdated meme.
Yeah.
It's 2 years outdated at that point, 4 years outdated now.
I think that's the problem, right? Like, is there like things that can like I'm trying to think of like what differentiates it, right? Because you can do like pop culture references that aren't going to instantly date themselves, but like I think it's kind of tough to do with like modern stuff because you don't know what's going to instantly outdate itself. Like memes are like really hard, are going to be like really hard to ever
about like
last.
the Footloose Cheers shit from Guardians 2, like the unspoken thing that Star-Lord is talking about. That is also a similar pop culture reference, but it's referencing pop culture from the 80s.
Yeah,
Because I guess Star-Lord, was a kid then.
but so I think the key there is that because it was strong enough, like it didn't date itself because it like is borrowing for something that like already proved it could stand the test of time, right? Like I guess theoretically we could have lived in a world where in 2030, like What Are Those is a classic like cultural touchstone, but we don't live in that universe.
And I also just feel like it is not there are memes that I do think would stand the test of time,
Yeah.
right? That have been around since the kind of creation of the internet that like you could say and they would be quotable and it would be funny and it'll be funny 20 years from now and we'll think of them in the same way that we think of Cheers or whatever. I don't think What Are Those is going to be that meme.
Yeah.
Like that one died out in a couple of months, right?
Yeah, I think it might have been dead before the movie came out, but maybe.
I also think it was probably dead before the movie came out. Ultimately, I guess I kind of agree with you. It's so minor though that I just like.
Yeah, no.
Don't really care that much.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree. I think I've like, I don't know. No, you're right. It's a relatively minor point, but it's the thing that annoyed me. I just also like because T'Challa feels like kind of like it doesn't feel like it's so much about him. Is it about maybe it's about Wakanda, which makes sense, but like he's dead for part of the movie, right? Like,
well, I think it is about his decisions, right?
Yeah.
And I appreciate that that core of like, do we stay locked off? Do we open ourselves up? That being the kind of thrust of his change, even if he is not changing as a character in a way. He is just sort of changing his sort of like mindset and his perspective on an issue. That I don't know. That stuff works fine for me. Even the fight itself, like falls. It's a bit of narrative sleight of hand, which I think technically makes it weaker, which is like kind of what we talked about. But ultimately, I think it works in the context of the movie, right? Technically, T'Challa did not make a decision that is weird or poor or anything along those sorts of like lines in the way that you would expect a hero to make a decision and then be punished for it. But it falls in that place and in that way that it kind of looks like he did in a way. So it skates for me. And even though I would technically agree that like it it, it is it's not a real moment of hubris. It's not a real moment of arrogance. It's not a moment where he's really planting his flag. This is another thing that I thought was a little weird. I remembered those scenes in an opposite order, but obviously they couldn't have been because he has to talk to Zuri and learn the truth before he accepts Killmonger's challenge or whatever. But in my head, the way I remembered it is he is standing up for his dad, and he's like, "You are not going to slander my father, and I'm going to beat you in this challenge because of whatever." And then he loses the fight and goes and he talks to his dad, and his dad's like, fucking I actually left this kid and it's a huge source of pain and regret and I killed my own brother and all this other sort of shit. And then T'Challa goes, "Oh no, I backed the wrong horse," right? Like that's his moment of hubris, right? But it doesn't happen that way. He talks to Zuri, Zuri tells him the whole thing, and then he accepts the challenge. And it's like maybe then it's like a confidence thing. Maybe he shouldn't have accepted the challenge, but he felt a duty to, but he's so shaken by all of this. But none of that is on scene. Like I said, I think it's kind of sleight of hand the way that
Yeah,
works. It's funny how much Aquaman has ruined this movie actually for me, because also I remember really loving that final fight with the fucking rhinos and like the buzzard flies and the thing with I thought all of that stuff was so cool, and I was so into it, and I was so into how all of it works. And now it just looks so small and like insignificant compared to like the Brine King and the Kraken, right? Like
yeah,
this kaiju moment, and even just the anime showdown of Orm and Aquaman, where he breaks Orm's staff and does the anime pose, and it's like super over the top. But that stuff just plays so much better in that movie, and it's kind of functionally the same sort of beats that it sort of ruined the end of this movie for me. Like it feels like a couple of kids playing in a backyard in comparison to this gigantic battle at the bottom of the ocean in the other movie.
I think I agree with you. I also think I don't. I feel like I don't quite. I don't think that they sell the stakes super well of that fight. And I think that's a real problem,
Yeah,
right?
I think the thing with War Dogs is not great. Like, I get it kind of intellectually, but not in my gut. Whereas, like, in my gut, I understand that Sokovia being lifted up and plopped as a meteor to destroy that is a real fundamental threat. I intellectually understand the threat of arming the War Dogs with these vibranium weapons or whatever, but like, I don't feel it doesn't actually kind of like feel real like honestly I'm much more engaged in the personal stakes of what's going on, right, of Okoye and the rhino guy kind of having this falling out because he's loyal to Killmonger for killing Claw, and she obviously thinks Killmonger is a piece of shit. Like, their interaction is just so much more kind of like heated, or like Nakia and Shuri versus Killmonger. I think all that stuff is just
Yeah. So
it's just way more interesting. There's way more going on.
I would agree with you there. So something that bothered me too, and maybe this is a little nitpicky, but like Okoye, uh, kind of defecting, like 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 as I'm watching some, like, but Killmonger, breaks Claw out of prison, and like they know this, right? This is like it's like a known thing that like you theoretically can solve with words, right? That like like, no, he just did that to, like, he didn't kill Claw because he was like doing it for like to actually do it. He was doing it as like a political ploy, essentially, right? Like, and it feels like the fact that it doesn't even get like lip service somewhere, it just felt kind of plot holish to me. Right? Like,
I don't know. I guess I get that, but that doesn't really bother me. I also think Okoye doesn't have as complete information as we do, right? Like, we obviously see Killmonger from the beginning. We understand his relationship with Claw. Um, and
sure,
also,
but
isn't he wearing the mask too?
he's got the ring, right? Like they
Yeah, I guess
figure
he's got
they figure out who he
they
is.
know. Yeah, they know
Yeah,
who he is. I don't
yeah,
know. I always felt like that was just pretty straightforward, lawful, neutral, kind of like neutral good people fighting. I actually really like the interaction that she has with Nakia, where it's like a real moment of pain for her. She has a real tough time with
yeah.
this thing.
No, I think
Um,
that works. Yeah, I agree.
so yeah, there's a lot of that stuff in this movie, and it is effortless. Like, there's just like so much going on, and I was really super like the stuff with M'Baku, who is also like great, and there's like a lot of drama with him. There's drama with the Rhino guy, whose name I don't remember. Maybe we get it, maybe we don't. There's all this stuff with like Zuri, right? Like, so many movies just do way less with their time than this stuff. I also think that Black Panther has a lot of really good action, except for that final fight of them on the trains. I think that sucks. Though I forgot about this moment. I love the Phantom Menace moment of they're on the either side of the train, and their
Mm.
like suits are like going like bzz, whatever. But just them actually fighting is just tremendously boring and shitty. But all the other action is really good. Like the stuff with Okoye throws the spear and it like stops the car is great. The whole thing, there's like a one shot inside of the casino that's also super great. I like watching Killmonger fight people who don't have the exact same power set as him. With the like Shuri has her little blaster guns, and Nakia has those things that she's like throwing and they're bouncing or whatever. Like, I think all that stuff works really well. and I enjoy it. It's just that final fight, boy, it is so boring watching them just like punch each other. I guess it's pretty mercifully short. But then also Killmonger is just the greatest like villain of all time. Like he's just so effortlessly like cool and evil and fun and just I could watch him every day of the week.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with you on that, but
Really? Ah, man, I love Michael B. Jordan. He is just a
well,
joy in that role.
I think he does. He puts forth a good performance, but I don't know if like I like him that much. Like I like his like he doesn't like. I don't know. I didn't think his villainy was that particularly great. And I think part of this is like I was talking about before, because he like T'Challa doesn't lose because of a flaw. He doesn't succeed because of a flaw. It feels just kind of like in the game of 2 out of 3, T'Challa wins on 2 because he puts the killing blow in, right? Like like it's like it doesn't feel like either of them is better than the other, right? It just kind of feels like this fight happened to go T'Challa's way. Or like the thing where he manages to get Michael, or to get Killmonger, isn't because T'Challa has learned a lesson, right? It's because he happened to win this time.
I do think it's because T'Challa has learned a lesson. T'Challa has realized like this flaw in true and that is why he makes the change at the end, right? Like he changes towards progressivism and moves away from
Right, but
doing
that's not what gets him to kill. Or that's not what lets him beat Killmonger 1-on-1, right? Like that's just kind of like I feel like it's
I see your point in that the river fight, right? Where like ultimately T'Challa kind of isn't really like in the overall scope of the narrative he is fighting for something, but in the personal moment he is actually not fighting for something. That's the sleight of hand that I'm talking about. But in the end, I think it's very clear that T'Challa's sort of wishy-washy nature has gone away. He is resolute, he's convicted, and that's the reason he wins.
I see. I don't like. I don't buy. I don't see anything particularly resolute about the way he fights that causes him to win that fight. Right? Like it's just
Like you mean like in like the actual punches?
yeah.
I guess.
Right. Like there's like in the like when I see
Okay.
these 2 1-on-1 fights, I see 2 evenly matched people, and the fight could go either way, and it's just to serve the narrative that one goes one way and one goes the other, not because of anything about those characters that dictates that they should go one way or the other.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess I get that. Though I also don't know. I, wow, that's weird. The stuff at the end works for me just fine. In fact, it's funny because the middle fight is better. Like I actually think that fight has a lot of like tension and drama to it, and
Sure.
obviously, like it's shot better and more interestingly. And I also just think that you can really feel like kind of like Killmonger's like fury and rage, and also sort of T'Challa's indecisiveness. But man, yeah, I guess I get that. Like, it's not that.
And this isn't necessarily like a problem like overall with with everything, right? Like I think the movie still does fine without it, but like in terms of like essentially a lot of these 1-on-1 fights are trying to be like like the like good versus evil in kind of like a compartmentalized form, is because good triumphs over evil that good wins, right? Like this is like Luke throwing away his lightsaber and letting go of his hate, right? Like T'Challa doesn't beat like the way you would do this is like have maybe Killmonger's rage cause him to like have the train hit him instead of something, or something like this is not a great way to do it, but like you have like something inherent about T'Challa's character be the reason why he succeeds over
Yeah, okay, I get this because as always, I'm going to relate this to movies that I talk about all the time. But like, so Zod's heat vision in the train station killing these people is the thing that gets Superman to make the killing blow, right? And that is both an action, right, in the fight, he's making the killing blow, and it is thematically in character, like it derives naturally from kind of like the themes in the character, right? Like it is the and it's the pinnacle of both of those things. But really, what you're saying is that the end fight scene is kind of like a plot contrivance, almost, right?
yeah.
Like T'Challa just knows the trains work in this way, but it's not like the trains have anything. There's nothing kind of more complex there. I guess I actually do sort of. You've kind of brought me around on that. I get that. Like he basically wins the fight. Like he wins the fight and he should win the fight based on where his character arc is, but he does not win the fight because of where he is in that character arc.
Yes.
They just kind of happen to align, which okay,
Yeah.
that I agree with that. That is not great.
Yeah. And like again, it doesn't like seriously detract from the rest of the movie. Like I said, I think this movie
Yeah.
is fine. But no, it's but yeah. That's. Do you want to talk about anything else before we move to our
No,
weeks?
I mean I still love Black Panther, obviously because it is so close to I don't know, just like it's sort of like Thor 2 or whatever, where it's just like it's dealing with stuff that I just love so much. Man, I love this movie. Um and also I really appreciate how like narratively like slick it is. With by being very detailed and efficient with just all of this information and drama. But yeah, I guess. Anyway, so what are your rankings look like right now?
All right. So from the top, um, Ant-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. This is where I put Ragnarok next. Then Captain
Okay.
America: The Winter Soldier, Iron Man 1, Avengers: Age of Ultron, Avengers, tied with Thor 2, Captain America: The First Avenger, Civil War, and then we get Black Panther and Homecoming. Then Iron
Wow.
Man 2, Thor 1, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 3 at the
God
bottom.
damn.
Yeah.
That is actually pretty deep, I guess. But you prepped me for this for
Yeah.
Homecoming and Black Panther.
This,
Um
just to kind of put that in context, this is not like I've said this before, but it's in the bottom half, but that's not because it's bad, right? Like those two, it's because there's a lot of things I just like better in kind of the MCU canon. Anyway, yours.
yeah, I get that. So of Black Panther is in the number 2 slot. It falls right under Age of Ultron, but ultimately loses out to Age of Ultron, which I don't think I would have said earlier. Which is weird. What keeps happening is I keep putting these movies. I'm like, is this better than this one? And I'm just like, you know, not better than Age of Ultron. I'm sorry, bud. So they keep getting in that number 2 slot. So that's and these are kind of my top ones, right? My top 5 would be Avengers: Age of Ultron, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, right? Like these are the truly great Marvel movies. Then we kind of have the middle, where Thor is in sort of the number 2 slot of the middle, right under Captain America: The Winter Soldier. So that's The Winter Soldier, Ragnarok, Iron Man 2, Guardians of the Galaxy 1, Thor 2, right? These are sort of my middle kind of chunk of movies. And then I kind of have everything that I don't really love or doesn't work great or is in sort of like the bottom sort of third, though it's a little bit more than a third, in which Spider-Man Homecoming is number 3. So then it is Hulk, Thor, Homecoming, Iron Man 3, Ant-Man, Iron Man, and then Civil War and the first Captain America in like the truly bottom of the bottom. So
All
we
right.
only have a couple more of these to do, right?
Yeah, I think we've got
Captain Marvel, Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp should be next week, and then it's Endgame, and
and
then it's
Far from
the other Spider-Man
Far
movie.
from Home. Are we?
Which, by the way, might actually put us close to Black Widow. Black Widow comes out that week, right?
Oh, does it?
Because that's Christmas week.
I thought. What comes out? When does Black Widow come out?
I think Black Widow is doing a Christmas thing, right?
That's
Disney
Wonder
Plus.
Woman 1984.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, Wonder Woman. I'm sorry.
God, buddy, not all female superheroes are the same.
Because I know that Black Widow and Wonder Woman is like Black Widow is coming to Disney Plus on I don't know at some point. Man, am I just crazy? Didn't they announce this?
It says May 7th, 2021 on the MCU page. Be followed by Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which comes out on my birthday. Oh boy!
Oh my god!
Did you
I
ever?
guess I guess I'm just completely thinking. I see a lot of speculation that Black Widow will be on Disney Plus, but you're right. I'm thinking of Wonder Woman, which is coming out on Christmas.
HBO Max, like a bunch of movies are coming out on HBO Max, like Dune.
Yeah,
Which
it's a big deal. I guess is what they're saying. Obviously, the biggest deal of all, the Snyder Cut is coming out on HBO Max. Oh boy, I cannot wait.
does Steppenwolf with more angles on him make you happy?
I love it. So the funny thing is I am constantly at this weird intersection of Snyder Twitter, because I follow a bunch of people who are Snyder Twitter, and like anti-Snyder Twitter, because I also follow a bunch of people who just like constantly riff on Snyder stuff, and it's like I'm living in an alternate reality because Snyder Twitter is like, oh my god, Steppenwolf looks so fucking cool. This is the craziest thing. This is what we wanted the whole time, right? And then anti-Snyder Twitter is like, lol, look at this. This is so dumb. What an edgy edgelord for the stupid edgelord Justice League movie. And it's like these two. And I don't know how to reconcile it, but it is hilarious to me. I fucking love the new Steppenwolf. This is exactly what I asked for when we reviewed Justice League 2 years ago. I think Steppenwolf should be more alien and should not talk as much and should be, like kind of that this like force of nature, right? And that new design, which by the way looks the shit when he if you see the thing where it's like there's like gifs of it where he's kind of smooth, but then all of the knives pop out. It looks sweet. I don't know what to tell you guys. This movie is like made for me and me alone, and I'm willing to die on that hill, I guess.
Yeah, no, I don't have strong opinions either way. I just thought it was like, okay, cool, whatever, right? But like the thing I did see, which I thought was kind of hilarious, is Sean Baby, who is a old school like video game humor writer, tweeted out something to the effect of like, I swear to God, this thing is just going to be like in black and white and just Hallelujah playing for an hour and a half, and that's all it's going to be. Oh.
I wouldn't be surprised. To be honest, a lot of this stuff I've heard some of this stuff before. Like, so for instance, people made fun of Aquaman's trident in the Justice League movie because it's technically a quindent. It has 5 points and not 3. And like there were memes running around where it's like, oh well, if you're Zack Snyder, you put more points on you got to be pointier, stabbier than the other trident or whatever. And I guess that those memes are funny, but that's actually true. The Aquaman trident from the comics had 5 points at that time. It was like, so it was just comics accurate. And also so like I don't know, there's just like it's that kind of stuff that happens all the time where people just like I don't know. I'm very used to Zack Snyder dunks at this point.
It would be very funny though if after the Steppenwolf reveal they revealed the Snyder cut version of the Trident, it just had like 12 points on it.
I mean that's true. Yeah. So anyway, we're doing. How do we get on this shit? We're doing next week is Captain Marvel, Infinity War,
and Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Ant-Man and the Wasp. Jesus Christ, I keep forgetting that movie is real. Yeah. So I guess those are the next 3, and then I guess we'll finish up with Far From Home and Endgame, both of which I have not seen since they have come out. I have watched a lot of these movies again, like a second time. Even Ant-Man and the Wasp, though I still remember nothing from that movie. I have watched almost all of these movies 2 times, except for I've never watched Endgame and I've never watched Far From Home a second time. So, who's interested?
Yeah.
This guy.
So, how was week 2 of or week 3 or whatever?
Shadowlands stuff. I am the second highest eye level on the server apparently.
Ooh.
Because one of the things that they changed is there's no war forging, there's no titan forging, there's no nothing like that, right? Like when you get a piece of gear, it is that piece of gear, and it is at that eye level that you expect it. The only thing that could happen is you could get a gem slot, right? You could roll like a gem slot to make the item like a little bit better. You could also buy gem slots and put them on items, sort of thing, but like that's like a later down the line sort of grindy sort of thing. So I've been doing what are called world tours. The best thing that anyone can do in the first 2 weeks of Shadowlands is Mythic 0 dungeons, right? There's no Mythic Plus, there's no raid, there's no rated PvP, which would get you like higher eye level gear. So the only thing that you can do is you can do these Mythic level dungeons, which have a weekly lockout. Last week I did a bunch of them, though not all of them. This week I have done 7 out of the 8. And I've just kind of gotten good drops, so I am mostly decked out in eye level like 184 gear, and so I'm going to be going into the raid tomorrow at eye level 183, trying to get the eye level 200 gear that drops off of the Castle Nathria bosses. To be honest, it has mostly been like I don't want to say more of the same, because when like progressing up in the kind of like eye level ranks is its own is sort of its own like grind or whatever. But because there is like nothing really to do once you've maxed your like renown and done your dailies in the end game zone, which is like the maw. Um, I've been spending a lot more time on alts here than I did in Battle for Azeroth. Right, in Battle for Azeroth, I probably played Bairn for like 2 or 3 weeks just straight, end over end. Right, because it just kind of felt like there was always more stuff to do, more stuff to clear that would be useful for him. Whereas now, kind of because they have dampened some of these like grindy systems, right? Like there's no Azerite, there's no artifact power, nothing kind of along those lines. It's pretty easy to knock that stuff out in a day, and it has a weekly lockout. So I guess you know what the only other thing to do is to go pop on some ults. So I leveled up Tonrik, my Alliance Warrior, to level 60, and I've been working on some other characters. Getting really into professions actually when it comes to like legendaries and unlocking legendaries and stuff like that, and setting people up to do Torghast. I'm very excited to do Torghast with multiple different characters because like now I almost I because I've done it a whole bunch for Arms Warrior, I have a very good understanding of how the anima powers work. Like what are the good powers, what are the different sort of builds I could go. Oh, I could go a cooldown builds where I'm like increasing the duration and lowering the cooldown of my builds, or I could go like a core attack build where I just lower the cooldown of my best move and I just use it over and over and over and over again, like that kind of stuff. So now I'm sort of interested to see what that looks like for other classes, right? So I can, I don't know, get a fuller picture of
Mm.
what kind of like Torghast looks like. The Torghast is fun, but it also sort of sucks because when you come out of Torghast and you're just like so powerful, it's just like fuck, I forgot my stuff is on like real cooldowns, and I don't just like
Yeah.
tear through everything because
Uh,
I like made this super fucking OP
It's like
build or
like
whatever.
restarting a what's it called, a roguelite run, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean that is exactly what it is, right? It is absolutely like restarting a roguelike run. The other cool thing is that the different wings of Torghast are fundamentally different, right? So there's a lot of when it comes to Torghast, you have certain wings that are like complex physical fights, right? Where like you are getting these little ads that when you kill them, they explode and they increase your physical damage taken by a whole lot. Like those guys are sort of their own puzzle. But then in another wing, you'll have these guys who drop pools of bad when they die. So like you're kind of painting the room and you're trying to consolidate these pools so that you can still move and explore the tower without taking too much like ambient damage or something kind of along those lines. So we've only seen 4 of the 6. The next 2 wings are coming out next week, as well as the next couple of levels. So I don't know. We'll see what that looks like. I guess tomorrow. What have you been up to? What have you been playing?
not a lot, honestly. Because we recorded late last week. Um, what I mostly, so the big thing I did is I built a new computer. It doesn't have a new graphics card in it yet, just because they're impossible to get. I'm actually
Yeah.
kind of sad. While we've been recording, all like 4 of my stock Discord servers have pinged, and couldn't get a card because busy doing this. This is what I do for you people. Although I probably would have not gotten one anyway because I never managed to get one. But no, it's I've got. I'll post a picture somewhere. Maybe I'll link to my Instagram where I'm planning on posting a picture of the build. Um, it's very pretty. It's got a lot of lights on it. I forged on the RGB fans, and it's got like a big glass panel on the side. I'm very happy with the way it looks. Um, and
Is
big.
that like you? How big a factor is that for you?
It's what the prettiness.
Just like making it look good.
So it hasn't been historically, but the fact that I did it this time and it looks great makes me very happy. Um,
Mm.
so maybe it'll be more of a factor in the future. Like my old machine is like a black box and it has like a window on the side, but it's like a tinted black window, so like you can like see like hints of color on it. Um, and cable management is this weird thing because like I found out with this build, right? Like I got the cables like in a reasonable position, but it's all behind this divider. So it means like the bulk of the case is just empty space to show off the fact that I have a computer, right? Like all the cables are like
Yeah,
behind this
I get
panel.
that.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, it's doing well so far. Couple of weird hiccups that like just reinstalling everything. Right, I had to go get this, set all this up so we could do this tonight. But yeah, so far so good. The big improvement in this one is I got the Ryzen 3 5900X, so I have like infinite cores, maybe less than you do at this point because you got like the i10, right?
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, so I think it's
like
got
the
Intel.
i10 900K or something, just like the ridiculous amount of cores. Which yeah, I have felt the benefits in gaming, but really the thing that I wanted it for was video editing because I do a bunch of video editing for the job, and like so now it used to take me like an hour and a half to render certain videos. Everything it feels like takes 20 minutes. Like 4 hours, 20 minutes. A highly detailed trailer, 20 minutes. Like most things render at about that time, which feels like I'm just, I don't know, saving. And I also can do more stuff. I think part of it was that like rendering really locked down my whole computer. And I was sometimes failing renders, which I think were because like stuff was going on in the background. And it was sort of just like interrupting the process or whatever. Now, if I'm rendering something, I could actually be like on Chrome, right, and like looking on Twitter. Like obviously, I wouldn't like run WoW or anything kind of along those lines. But the fact that the computer is like usable rather than it's like, okay, well, nobody fucking touch this for the next hour and a half,
Yeah,
like, is pretty nice.
you might actually be able to do something like Run WoW just because, like, I think my understanding is that's kind of like the point of the multiple cores, right? Like,
Yeah.
they can like my hope and hopefully what one of our viewers can tell us at some point is that the cores have helped with this streaming process, right? I used to have problems configuring my old machine to stream without a lot of lag in it, and obviously us doing webcams isn't the hardest thing, but maybe for my personal stuff in the future I can stream something that won't be. We'll see. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. Like I had a lot harder time streaming older game. It's nice because the Occupar games are pretty lightweight, and that's all the streaming that I was doing. But like if I was to stream Overwatch, right, like it would be impossible, just because my processor was not strong enough to both play the game and stream it.
Well, yeah, but unfortunately, I played a bunch of different D&D over the weekend.
Oh, nice.
Um,
I haven't heard about it. What are your D&D games looking like? I was not there for a Star Wars game yesterday because I
I
was
did not
too
run
busy.
it because a
Oh,
snowplow
okay.
woke me up at 3 in the morning,
Oh
and
my
I couldn't fall back asleep, and so I canceled it. I didn't think I was gonna be like it was this
god.
combination of things, and not only did that wake me up at 3 in the morning, but then I discovered that Sheen, which I built, so the Ryzen processors are so new that the like motherboards don't work with them natively, so you have to do a flashback on them. And I discovered I didn't have a
Oh my
USB
god.
stick. So I got up at 3 in the morning, was like, it's like, well, if I'm not gonna fall asleep, I might as well like finish the computer, right? So turn the computer on, and it's like not recognizing it's like giving me this weird error. I'm like, what the hell is happening here? I'm googling. It's like, oh yeah, you have to do a flashback on the motherboard, and so it's like, oh, I don't have a USB stick, and it's like 5 in the morning. It's like Walmart opens at 7. So I was like, oh god, shoot. So I like go to Walmart at 7, get my stuff, come home, like boot the computer up, Windows starts installing. I'm like, great, and I like collapse and fall asleep, and then like do rinse and repeat like that for like most of the day. It was not the most fun.
Fair enough. I also tried to. I've been having a weird time sleeping because last week I took the whole week off to play Shadowlands, right? And so, or I'm sorry, the week before last week I took the whole week off to play Shadowlands, and then last week I was just like impossible to get back on a good sleep schedule. I just like kept staying up till 4 in the morning all the time, and then I would get up early and just be like dead tired. And I had that presentation that I was talking about. Like I pitched this, I didn't pitch this. I plugged this at the end of last week's podcast, which was at 9 a.m. In Pacific time. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, am I going to go to bed at 4 a.m. and get up, 4 hours later to do this presentation? And the answer is yes, I am going to do that. But the good news is that the presentation went very well, so I'm very happy with that. And like it didn't. I guess like just the adrenaline or whatever of it like worked so to get me into it and through it, and I just practiced that fucking thing so many times. Um, that I don't know that it all
Yeah.
worked out. So the other gaming thing to completely change gears now that I thought about it is that the Total War DLC came out, and I have been trying so hard to play it, which is a weird thing. I have an amazing number of hours. I have 800 hours in Total War, right? you would think it would be so easy for me to, the new DLC, that updates my favorite faction in the game, the Wood Elves, right? All of these new features, all of this new stuff to do with the Wood Elves, to play with them. They have new units. They have completely redone the campaign system in a really like unique and interesting way. And it's just like, I cannot for the life of me play this game. All I want to do is play World of Warcraft. And I'm done with World of Warcraft on Tuesday, right? Like, and so I'm sitting here like leveling a third alt whose whole job is to just run around and farm ore and like herbs, like the least interesting, the least important thing. But I legitimately want to do that more than play one of my favorite games of all time, releasing new content built specifically for me. Which, I don't know, it's just like the world we live in, I guess. The neat thing about the Wood Elf update that I have found in the 2 hours that I've played of it is that they have made a lot of changes to make Wood Elves playing tall feel better, which is cool. Because I think so in Mandalore, who did a recent big review, he talked about how something that strategy games have a tough time with is making playing tall interesting, right? Because if you're playing tall and you're not expanding, you are fighting the same enemies over and over again because your borders are pretty static, right? And you're only going to fight the people who are next to you. And like the internal systems of your empire, whatever that looks like, have to be compelling enough that like you can't kind of redo the same loop over and over again of building a fresh colony, right? Because if you're doing an expansionist sort of playthrough, right, you are constantly picking up new colonies and sort of running them through a set of decisions that you can repeat a bunch of times, right? If you pick up 40 new planets, each one of those has to go through, well, now first you have the colony ship, then you upgrade to this, and then you're kind of like making these sorts of like branching choices. But if you have 5 planets and you're committed to going as deep on those planets as possible, it can be very hard to like make that a I guess, I don't know, just like a compelling set of strategy decisions. And the way that they address this with the Wood Elves is they basically made so the first problem is you are constantly getting these little events, these like little triggers that happen where it's just like, oh, a group of fucking dark elves showed up and they're doing bad stuff. Do you want to fight some dark elves? Do you want to do some diplomacy with dark elves? Do you want to do whatever? So like you're kind of constantly cycling in new interesting like factions to fight. You're not just fighting, well, I'm next to Bertonia, so I'm going to fight Bertonia over and over and over again. I'm next to the Greenskins, so I'm going to fight the Greenskins over and over and over again, right? And then the other thing that they did is they took those nodes, right, like the big tall trees, and they spread them out, right? It used to be you were all the only buildings you could really use were in Athel Loren. Well, now there are magical forests all over the world, and you can teleport between them. So you can go to the Witchwood, which is on the Dark Elf content. You can go to the Sacred Pools, which is on the Lizardman content, and they can all be built very tall, right? And you only have to worry about a couple of like small zones or provinces or whatever. But it pretty radically changes your gameplay when you are like interfacing with these different places all across the map, which just all that seems very cool. And I would love to go really deep on it, but I can't get more than 20 turns in because fuck my whole life, I guess. Also, I haven't checked out any of the new Skaven stuff, which I think looks great and very cool, and I want to do more stuff with it. But if I can't even crack the Wood Elves, man, what the fuck am I going to do with this
Yeah.
game?
Yeah, no, I don't know if you saw, but Mandalore did a review of the expansion of the DLC. Apparently, they got it to him early. So
that was what I was referencing because he talks about that in that review where he said they have made playing tall as the Wood Elves a lot more interesting,
yeah.
which I do think is true because it used to be playing tall as the Wood Elves meant conquering half of the world and then finding a military alliance, and that just sucked and was weird and not fun, even if the battles themselves were great.
Well, the big thing coming up this week is Cyberpunk actually comes out on Wednesday for us. I don't know if you saw this.
Oh my god!
So
I mean, I don't have plans to pick up Cyberpunk the day of, but I have also seen reviews where people said that it's fine, but not great, and everybody got real mad about it.
Yeah, so I did this review. So the review embargo dropped like today at like noon my time, 9 your time, I think. And it seemed like the consistent themes were like the game's cool, but it's very very buggy. and that's like enough to like knock some stuff off of it. And like,
I've also heard it's shorter than people gave it thought it
yeah,
would be.
but short is like numbers I saw anywhere from like 15 to 25 hours is short, and that's if you just like mainline the main quest.
Fair enough.
And there's like over 100 hours of content if you want to do like everything. It feels like it's probably like Skyrim in that way. Like that's like at least my read on it.
Okay.
But we'll see. I'll be playing it on launch, so it's 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. You're wasting this golden opportunity to play it for. You could preload it right now.
Get one up on everybody else.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that so tomorrow the raid Mythic Plus all that stuff opens up, which now will be the like it'll just there will always be stuff to do. It'll feel like wow, right? Like you can always. My hope is that I can get Mythic Plus to that point where it will be like how we used to play League, where just like you log on and there's a couple of people and you go, hey, do you guys want to like queue for some M Plus? And we all go like, yeah, because like the group of people who are playing WoW is pretty big right now, and like we've been kind of creating all kinds of different sorts of like combinations or whatever. But the best way to get high end gear will be like the weekly chest thing, and that just requires doing a lot of WoW stuff, right? So it'll just kind of feel like there's always something to do, even if you're just pugging, right? Right now, like I couldn't pug because I have these weekly lockouts which are static, but Mythic Plus doesn't have that problem. You know, anytime you do an N Plus dungeon, you will get a piece of loot, or I'm sorry, the party will get a piece of loot in that final chest. So
Awesome. Yeah. Right. Well, kind of at the end of our time then.
yes, we are.
So, do you have anything you want to promote first?
I have nothing to promote this week. Things are pretty simple for me after that big giant presentation. I'm trying to get back, you know, to actually thinking about other pieces of my job. Right?
Is there a VOD for that somewhere?
Not that I know of yet, but they did say that it would be recorded. So at a certain point, I'm sure I will get a link.
All right, we'll post that then. Well, if you'd like to email us, tell us what anything you thought about the movies we talked about today or any other things we talked about, email us at podcast@subdorsplaygames.com or subdorsplaygames@gmail.com. Follow us on twitch.tv/subdorsplaygames. You can watch these episodes live now. What else? Rate and review us on iTunes. Give it to us on Patreon if you're feeling especially generous. Follow us on social medias. Links will be in the description. That's everything I had. We already did the promotion stuff. I'll have to modify this. Until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.